Let's face it, new smartphones can be pretty expensive. And while that's hardly a new phenomenon, this year has been filled with lots of examples of such models, from the new iPhone costing as much as $970 to Google's latest Pixel phone costing up to $870. That is a long way removed from the days of the $300 Nexus. But in addition to phones like those, we're also seeing a healthy dose of new affordably priced handsets hit the market, aiming to give shoppers a good value above all else. A couple months back, we took a look at a couple models like that from Lenovo, the mid-range Moto G4 and Moto G4 Plus. Priced at $200 and $250, those are both very approachable models, but now the latest G4 is looking to bring prices even lower. I'm Stephen Shank with PhoneArena, bringing you my review of the $150 Moto G4 Play. No matter what kind of smartphone you're building, putting a handset together is a question of balance. For some, that means weighing concerns like durability and a desire to have a large battery against the drive to keep designs thin and attractive. For the incredibly budget-priced phones, that balancing act is all the more difficult, as they're also trying to give shoppers as much value for their phone-buying dollar as they can possibly get. The earlier Moto G4 and Moto G4 Plus attempted to walk that line while still splurging on a few niceties here and there, like full HD screens or the fingerprint scanner on the Plus. The Play has no room for such extravagances, giving us a very basic, straightforward phone, but for a very appealing price. Instead of the 5.5-inch 1080p displays of those models, the Moto G4 Play gets a 5-inch 720p screen. That makes it not nearly as sharp looking as its brethren, and our tests found its screen to be somewhat less bright as well. It struggles a bit with visibility in really bright outdoor conditions as a result, but indoors it's still quite nice, especially with the display's vibrant mode enhancements, though we wish they added a bit more kick. That screen sits in the middle of an otherwise unadorned face, no fingerprint scanner here, and while it's all clean looking, the bezels are a wee bit on the large side. Above the screen, the phone's earpiece pulls double duty as a mono front-facing speaker. We know stereo would be better, but the screen front placement is pretty good, and this is one of the loudest speakers we've tested in quite a while. Around back, we've got a simple single LED flash paired with the phone's 8-megapixel camera. There's a headphone jack up top, and while flagships experiment with dropping that connector, we doubt we'll be seeing budget models go the same route anytime soon. And there's micro USB for charging down below. The handset's pretty lightweight, coming in nearly 20 grams below the Moto G4 and G4 Plus, and it shares a similar construction with those models, featuring the same tear-away back panel for access to SIM and microSD slots, and in this case, a removable battery as well. Compared to those models though, rear components like the camera are a little lower down on the G4 Play, with the consequence that the familiar Motorola dimple isn't in a very useful spot here. It's just too low for your fingertip to comfortably rest there while using the handset. There's no fancy waterproofing here with anything like protection from submersion, but Lenovo does use its nano-coating tech to help defend the G4 Play against more casual liquid contact. Stuff like splashes or light rain should be just fine. The G4 Play is driven by the aging Snapdragon 410 processor, the same chip we saw on last year's Moto G3. That's paired with 2GB of RAM for a system that's right at home, browsing the web, or engaging in some light social media, though also one that you'll quickly notice getting bogged down if you try doing too much at once. Then again, if you're a power user with processing demands to match, why are you looking at a $150 smartphone in the first place? There's a sole 16GB storage option, though as we mentioned, a microSD slot is available for expansion, should you feel like taking advantage of it. One benefit to a processor that's not pushing any limits is that power requirements are relatively low, and combined with the phone's good-sized 2800 mAh battery, Lenovo's claim of all-day usage is very believable. In our tests, we got over 10 hours of screen on time. The only downside there is that the charger that came with our phone had a lowly 550 milliamp output, taking over 4 hours to fully juice things up. You're almost certainly going to want to look into replacing that with a more powerful adapter, should you pick this guy up. The handset runs Android 6.0.1 with blissfully light skinning like we've come to expect from Motorola phones, and it's especially low profile here. The G4 Play we looked at arrived bloat-free, though that's not always the case, something we'll circle back around to in a minute, and presents a familiar, easy-to-access interface. Sadly, the G4 Play is missing quite a few of the Moto extras its siblings enjoy, and the phone is stripped with all but one of its cool action gesture commands. No double chop for flashlight here. Cellular connectivity is nothing less than awesome, with the same unlocked, broad network support we saw with the G4 and G4 Plus. Pop in a SIM from not just T-Mobile or AT&T, but also Sprint or Verizon, and you're good to go. Sure, the phone supports micro SIM and not the increasingly more common nano SIM, but that's what we've got adapters for. call quality is perfectly reasonable, and we didn't run into any issues with voice traffic. When you're building a phone this low priced, you've gotta cut corners somewhere, and the Moto G4 Play's cameras aren't gonna blow you away. The word adequate comes to mind. The rear shooter's an 8-megapixel component with an f2.2 aperture. It's capable of taking some decent looking shots, but we found it a bit finicky in our testing, struggling with exposure in many daylight situations. HDR helps a ton there, and auto HDR can take the guesswork out of when to use it, but we still wish this were a crutch the phone leaned less heavily upon. The 5-megapixel front facer is nothing fancy either, and runs into a little trouble in low light areas. Sadly, there's no front-facing LED flash, leaving users to rely on screen illumination. Video performance is maybe a little worse than still shots, with 720p in particular looking pretty bad. 1080p fared a bit better, but with the return of exposure problems, to say nothing of slow, wandering autofocus issues, we probably won't be shooting a ton of video with the G4 Play. As you know by now, this is one super affordable smartphone, going for just about $150. But if even that's too rich for your blood, there's a more affordable version of the G4 Play available as an exclusive to Amazon Prime members. Those shoppers can snag the handset for just under $100, though with the caveat that the previously bloat-free phone is now encumbered with Amazon ads and offers on its lock screen. You're going to have to decide for yourself if that's worth a $50 discount. In life, we tend to get what we pay for, but with the Moto G4 Play, that actually translates to a fair amount of phone for the money. Performance is nothing to write home about, sure, and there's some dated tech inside, but really, smartphone processing requirements for basic tasks haven't gone up all that much, and so long as you keep your expectations in check, the G4 Play is soundly equipped to handle casual usage. While the display isn't the brightest, highest res screen we've seen by a long shot, it honestly gets the job done, and when paired with that nice loud front-facing speaker, it makes the Play a decent phone on which to consume media. Really though, the G4 Play has two big things going for it. There's that really nice battery, easily getting you through the day, and a really low $150 sticker price, or $100 if you go with the Amazon deal. Even with a less than glamorous design and camera that kept us wanting, that adds up to making the Play a really tempting option for Android users looking to save a few, or honestly more than a few bucks. I'm Steven Shank with PhoneArena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming smartphone coverage.